Ever since its conception, DLC has had a contentious place within the video game industry. Though players initially laughed at the sheer ridiculousness of charging money for horse armor in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the practice of purchasing additional content is something that hasn't gone away and is unlikely to go anywhere soon. If anything, DLC has become more prevalent in games today, with expansions, cosmetics, and battle passes now being expected in most new releases. But just because they're expected doesn't mean that they're any good, and there have been some times that video games have charged you money for something that really is just taking the piss. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video games that made you pay for essential features. Number 10. Starting a new run. Mighty Doom. Being a free-to-play mobile game, players can expect a ton of grinding and top-down roguelite Mighty Doom to upgrade the Doomslayer's arsenal enough to progress in later levels. Getting the materials for said upgrades, therefore, takes numerous runs to acquire. However, starting a new run in this game isn't as straightforward as it should have been. Instead of simply opting to try again after dying, which will happen a lot, beginning a new attempt is tied to an in-game currency known as energy, which players will need to have 5 of if they'd like to play the game. When energy is depleted, the choice is to either wait for hours and hours until the resource replenishes itself, or to spend real money in order to get the energy required to play. But most annoyingly is this cutesy version of the gory run-and-gun shooter only allows players to hold a maximum of 20 energy at a time. This means that players can only play a measly 4 games before they're forced to either wait or throw money at the game for the privilege to try again. Even for free-to-play games, being encouraged to pay to play the game is pretty absurd. Number 9. Save slots. Metal Gear Survive. Metal Gear Survive was a game that had everything going against it before it even launched. Not only was the game's zombie survival premise the furthest thing from what fans wanted from a Metal Gear title, but this was infamously the spin-off title that came in the wake of Hideo Kojima's departure from Konami. The game looked like a soulless cash grab on a popular IP, and that's exactly what it was. The plot was uninteresting, and the gameplay loop of scavenging resources was dull and uninspired. Survive was simply an unenjoyable experience to play, but somehow these weren't the worst parts of the game. In a rather unpleasant shock to everyone, Konami had the audacity to charge players for additional save slots, a feature that is so commonplace in modern games that the thought of being asked to pay for them was pretty unthinkable. If players wanted to have more saves than the solitary slot, they'd need to exchange around $10 of their own money for Survive's SV coins, which could then be used to acquire extra saves. Even if the game was worth playing more than once, this piece of paid-for content is nothing less than pure greed from Konami. Number 8. Storage boxes. Fallout 76. Despite undergoing a handful of game-changing updates which added heaps of exciting content, Fallout 76 nevertheless remains notorious for its catastrophic launch. From pre-order blunders, a handful of game-breaking bugs, and a massive data leak, the beginning of this game's life was a complete disaster. Even when Bethesda had corrected some of the biggest concerns surrounding their game, fans were still displeased with a sizable list of grievances which spoiled their time in the post-apocalyptic West Virginia. One such gripe was the stingy limit placed on how much scrap players could store. Although the quantity has since been increased to £1,200 since launch, the cap remains a thorn in the community's side. However, there was a way to increase storage space, and that was to pay for the Fallout First subscription service, which will set players back around $11.99 a month or £99 a year. Alongside unlocking private servers and unique cosmetic items, this subscription fee would likewise grant players unlimited space for all of their base building materials. Being such a heavily requested feature, it's understandable why the community voiced their outrage at Bethesda for charging them for what is effectively a quality of life feature that they had asked for since launch. Boo. Number 7. The True Ending. Azura's Wrath. It's not unusual for games to drop massive plot points as part of DLCs. Assassin's Creed Origins, for example, waited for the Hidden Ones expansion to show how the Order of Assassins came to be, and Alan Wake expanded upon the titular writer's fate with the release of 2 bonus chapters that picked up after the events of the main game. And as important as these DLCs were in understanding the overarching narrative, they weren't essential when it came to finishing the game. But the same cannot be said for Azura's Wrath. When the dust settles at what looks to be the climactic finale of the eponymous hero's high-octane quest to rescue his kidnapped daughter, players were led to believe that he'd succeeded in his mission. But Azura's story wasn't over yet, and the only way of seeing the true ending was to purchase the final 4 episodes. Here, the demigod story continued as an unexpected revelation took the real finale in an exciting new direction for more outlandishly fantastic action spectacle. As excellent as this game is, charging customers more to experience the real ending of Azura's epic tale was a rather sneaky move from Capcom. Number 6. The rest of the game. Evolve. There was a lot of excitement surrounding Evolve back in 2015. Helmed by Left 4 Dead developers Turtle Rock Studio, this asymmetric multiplayer game saw a team of 4 players working together to hunt a player-controlled monster before the creature had time to evolve into a near-unstoppable killing machine. Evolve's initial reception proved promising, with many praising the game's taut gameplay and unique atmospheric setting. And while the title was a success at launch, it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Alongside a sluggish progression system turning the title into a prolonged grind, it was the ludicrous DLC plans which sparked controversy surrounding the game. While Take-Two was generous enough to offer new maps for free, everything else from cosmetics to new monsters and heroes was locked behind a paywall. There were 44 pieces of DLC available on launch day alone, and they were worth over $130 in total. Now, whereas it's normal for games to include some extra content as paid DLC, Evolve took things too far by charging players too much to access the rest of the game in a fatal move that would lead to the plug being pulled on this once highly anticipated release. Number 5. Story missions. Overwatch 2. Since Overwatch 2 launched in October 2022, Blizzard have made some questionable decisions that have caused fans to raise an eyebrow on more than one occasion. Alongside having the sequel replace the first game, the cancellation of the highly anticipated Hero PvE mode have definitely been points of contention for veterans of this multiplayer shooter. But despite these disappointing missteps, fans have been patiently waiting for the arrival of story missions which were noticeably absent at launch. Taking place in expansive new areas, these missions are set to build upon the series' overarching lore, something that players have been eagerly awaiting. However, in another disheartening blow to the Overwatch community, Blizzard announced that the first 3 missions launching as part of the upcoming 6th season would only be available to those willing to pay $15 for them. While this bundle does include some extra goodies like credits and legendary skins, slapping a sizable price tag on the major feature that fans have been excited for comes across as a rather manipulative move from Blizzard, especially when this content is substantially less than what was initially promised. Though Overwatch 2 is free to play, being strong-armed into paying for the game's main selling point has not gone down well. Number 4. ELVISH Dialogue. The Lord of the Rings Gollum. After facing multiple delays since its announcement, The Lord of the Rings Gollum finally released in May 2023 to critical scathing. The stealth action game starring the titular character was set to bring players into the fantastic world of Tolkien's Middle-earth in order to tell an original story from a unique perspective. However, a selection of mediocre missions, bland narrative, and downright broken gameplay mechanics drastically soured the experience. Even though playing as Gollum wasn't much fun, the game nevertheless managed to immerse players in one of the greatest fantasy worlds ever created, thanks in part to some genuinely impressive sound design and music, and a large part of the game's appeal was experiencing Tolkien's world. But this title fumbled this as well by charging players extra money to hear Elvish characters speaking in Elvish. It's only by purchasing the VO pack as part of the Precious Edition or as a separate DLC that players will be able to hear Elvish characters consistently conversing in their native tongue. Despite the devs claiming that the dialogue was created by lore experts, placing such a basic part of Middle-earth behind a paywall was another baffling misfire for what's considered to be one of the worst games of the year so far. Number 3. The actual intended difficulty setting. Metro Last Light. Adding extra difficulty modes is an effective way of generating extra levels of challenge for players after rolling the credits on a main game. After completing Resident Evil 4 Remake, for example, Resi fans can test their skill on professional difficulty where limited saves and tougher enemies will test the skills of even the most accomplished players. And while difficulty modes are typically already included in the base game, there are times when extra modes are added in post-launch, with Amnesia the Bunker expected to include a shell-shocked mode pretty soon. But what's not expected though is for publishers to charge an additional price for these difficulty modes. But this is exactly what happened in Metro Last Light, when it included its Ranger difficulty setting as a pre-order bonus before then releasing it as a DLC pack. By making the gameplay more realistic by removing HUD crosshairs and limiting how much your character could carry, this mode was for hardcore survivors, but it was the fact that this setting was advertised as the intended way to play the game that caused the backlash. If fans wanted to play the game apparently the way the developers envisioned, they now needed to pay an extra $4.99 to do so. Artistic vision shouldn't come as an extra cost. Number 2. Javik. Mass Effect 3. In the critically acclaimed Mass Effect series, players spent much of their time as Commander Shepard fighting back against the impending Reaper invasion in between romancing crewmates, but not much is divulged about what exactly the Reapers are during the first 2 games other than their arrival would spell the end of the entire universe, with the extinction of an alien race known as the Protheans underscoring how dangerous the Reapers were. But it wasn't until Mass Effect 3 that players finally learned more about this precursor race, when a skirmish for an artifact would lead the Normandy crew to discovering Javik, the last remaining Prothean. However, this was only possible if fans picked up the From Ashes DLC. Alongside adding a new squad mate to the game, From Ashes was essential in filling in gaps in lore surrounding this race and the crucial role that they played within the Mass Effect universe. Even more irritating was this DLC was released alongside the game's launch, a move that sparked allegations that this content was included on the disc but locked away behind a paywall to wring extra funds from fans. And number 1, locking players out of the game. Destiny: The Taken King. Live service models can be a tricky balancing act in which developers must find a way to bring exciting and engaging content to their game in order to increase revenue without punishing those who choose not to purchase any extras on top of the vanilla experience. For most live service titles, this is achieved by implementing a paid-for season pass to reward customers with premium content alongside the free update that everyone has access to. But Destiny didn't seem to get this memo, however, when Bungie dropped the Taken King expansion. While this expansive update added a ton of new and improved features alongside a taught campaign that reinvigorated the looter shooter, not everybody got to experience the new and improved Destiny. Because those who didn't upgrade to the new expansion weren't just unable to take part in the new campaign or game modes, but they unfortunately found themselves severely restricted on what they had access to, with Hero Strikes and the new Vanguard playlist now being off the table. Thanks to the sheer amount of gameplay tweaks offered in the update, those who didn't purchase the expansion were locked out of playing the game that they'd actually already paid for, forcing players to buy DLC just to continue playing a game. Well, that sounds incredibly unfair to me. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video games that made you pay for essential features. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules, and if you want to chat to me further on social media, so you can go to @RetroJ on Twitter and on Instagram, but the O is a 0, or you can swing by FGS or the Future Game Show, where I'm doing all of my gaming content going forward. Hope to see you over there. Big love to you, my friend. Hope you're treating yourself well with love and respect, and remember, you're a massive ledge. Speak to you soon. Bye.